So I would like to call special open council meeting number 14 for May 16 to order. And at this point, I will recognize, or we will recognize, that we meet on the traditional territory of the LHTAKO DENE. There is no, do we need an approval of the agenda?
Sorry, I graded out this, and we have one late agenda item.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda with the one additional late item. Please and thank you. Councillor McKelvey, Councillor Vick. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So I'm looking at items D through N. We don't have any, so I'm not going to read that through verbatim. And we only have one item of new business, and that is the likely steam shovel. And I will say that that I do have a prepared statement here that I'd like to read to sort of launch the meeting, and it is as follows. This meeting was called because, as mayor, I ordered a pause of the moving of our steam shovel to likely in view of new information that has come forward since council's previous decision to repatriate the steam shovel back to likely. The word repatriate implies that the item or items being returned were taken without consent or permission of the owner. In fact, it has been said that the steam shovel was spirited away from likely without permission or consent. I have even heard a rumor that it was stolen. Our research and feedback solidly reveals otherwise. Just today, I learned from the Caribou Observer archives that likely was not even the former owner of the steam shovel. As it was sold, the steam shovel was sold to the city of Quesnel by the government of the province of British Columbia for the sum of $1. In spite of that, our extensive research has revealed that there was mutual consultation, agreement, and willingly shared work from members of both communities in gathering up the scattered steam shovel pieces and moving them from likely, actually from the bullion pit, to Quesnel. Among other calls and connections I have received from people in both Quesnel and Likely, I received one email and a pair of calls from folks, in one case from their family, in Likely, who actually helped collect the pieces and move the steam shovel to Quesnel. One is 90 years old and remembers well how he helped in the move. I am told that Jack Ives, J.P. McKelvey, and as Jack Ives says in his January 28th letter to the editor, and I've included that as one of your handouts, quote, "It was not a one-man show," unquote, and many from both Likely and Quesnel were willingly involved, including our own council of the day. And a side note, I received a call late this afternoon from the mayor of the day, Mike Pierce, as he saw this on Facebook as he was driving over to Penticton, and he called me 2 hours ago from Richmond. I have also handed out with your agenda package Caribou Observer stories from the time, including one from March 16, 1988, titled, "Where, oh where should the steam shovel go? Some things never change." As with our beloved gold pan, there is, dare I say, intentional, an acute lack of transparency and public information, consultation, and awareness about the proposed removal and relocation of our beloved steam shovel. In the agenda package for this meeting, there is a copy of a letter from our city manager to the Likely Community Coordinator pledging to repatriate the steam shovel and boiler pump that currently sit on Riverfront Trail near the steam shovel. Just yesterday, I had a call from a well-known and respected local historian advising that the city is unknowingly giving away a pair of significantly important pieces of our own Quesnel heritage. I am told that the boiler and accompanying pump never were in or anywhere near likely. This old equipment was in use in the late 1800s in the tertiary, which means underground or under river mine at the mouth of the Quesnel River, pretty well exactly where those artifacts sit on display to this very day. Today, we received an offer from the Quesnel and District Heritage Association to permanently display the steam shovel at our city-owned antique machinery park. This public open meeting was called only a day ago, and up until a few hours ago, the required public notice, including agenda subject matter, which is steam shovel, of this meeting was not disclosed until I asked for and received that disclosure from staff. In spite of extraordinarily short public notice, public interest is already very high. I would respectfully ask that Council further pause the moving of the steam shovel to likely until we have held a public information meeting where the public can have their rightful input into this sensitive and potentially troubling plan. And again, with respect, I am simply trying my best to avert a repeat of the gold pan controversy. There's my statement, and I would now open the floor up to questions. I'm sorry?
You have a staff report?
We have a staff report.
Yes, I'm sorry. We have a staff report. Where is it? Is it on the? Is it? Okay, sorry. Flip the page. I'm sorry. Okay, I am now going to go to the city manager for the staff report. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is quite a quick report. It was done today. So the mayor has asked for a council meeting to discuss the imminent relocation of the steam shovel from LHTAKO Park and its future move to Likely. This report is about that. And when I say imminent, let me say that our contractor who is moving the steam shovel was ready to move it last night. He's been getting all his ducks in a row, and he told me he was down there ready to move it when the mayor showed up. So the underlying reason for the relocation of the steam shovel and steam boiler from the current locations is the revisioning of the park, which is being newly named to LHTAKO Park. That site is the former village site for the LHTAKO Nation. Very long history of occupation. In addition to the renaming, there are special features underway for the park. Council probably recollects that full development plan, and it's a pretty exciting plan. The council is seen and is being presented here in open council chambers. So council supported the renaming of Seal Tingley Park to LHTAKO Park on May 10th. At the same meeting on May 10th, council also supported the relocation of the steam shovel with the following unanimous resolution: that council directs staff to continue working with the Likely Chamber of Commerce and Tourism Association to repatriate the steam shovel artifact to the Likely bullion pit, and that the move be well communicated to the public. Since last May, staff applied for a grant which would cover off the cost of relocating that old equipment. And on June 21st of 2022, a large public gathering was held for Indigenous Day down at LHTAKO Park. I think most or all of you may have attended that. Our former mayor spoke about the renaming of the park and the development plans for it. This included a discussion of repatriating the old equipment to the Likely area, and in fact, representatives from Likely were on hand and spoke at this event. So that's a full year ago. Well, not quite a year, June 21st, 2022. The contractor hired to relocate the equipment is currently working on moving it. Steam boiler's already been moved and the shovel's next. On Monday of this week, Mayor asked me to put a stop to the move and asked me to hold a special council meeting to tell council about the new plan for the steam shovel. The mayor does have the right to call for that special council meeting, and out of respect for this meeting knowing it was to be held, we did halt the work on the relocation until we see where council's head is at, if there's a change in direction from council. Yeah, and I guess there's really two main components to removing the artifacts. First, it's relocating them from LHTAKO DENE Park is important to make room for the planned improvements for which we're awaiting delivery. And then the moving them to question, and to likely, as a likely Chamber of Commerce has been led to believe is forthcoming. In my opinion, reneging on either of those items wouldn't be in good faith by the city. The city has made commitments with unanimous council resolutions on both the relocation from and relocation to sides of the issue. The likely group has also actively been getting ready for the move. They're funding the preparations needed to place the equipment in its new setting out at the Bullion Pit. They are also have got a coalition of different organizations, so that would be the likely Hatsul Community Forest is engaged and has given blessing to do it on the lands which they control. It's part of their licensee or licensed lands, and then as well the likely of Chamber of Commerce. Should be noted that the city approached the likely Chamber of Commerce to see if they're interested in receiving the old equipment. That wasn't based on a lobbying effort by likely. It was the opportunity to return items from where they came from. Now, having said that, there's been some mention of the word repatriation. Repatriation in the dictionary means to move something home or move it to where it came from. It doesn't have a negative connotation that, oh, something was stolen and it needs to be returned. There was never any talk about those items are stolen, let's return them. The conversation was, if we're moving them to make way for the modifications in LHTAKO DENE Park, where should they go? And so the decision by council was to say, well, let's put them out to likely where they came from. And the rationale there was we could have suggested the Antique Machinery Park, or maybe there's a different location in Quesnel. Any other place in Quesnel, that's an interesting piece of iron. It's interesting right where it sits. It would be interesting anywhere else. If it's moved to likely, it's an interesting piece of iron, but it's also part of their history. It's restored that, in particular, that steam shovel, that's where its location was. So it would be restoring their history by moving it back. That's why that decision was made. And that decision was made by council. And finally, it gets very difficult for city staff in trying to determine how to proceed when we get directions from council. So think about this. On May 10th of 2022, more than a year ago now, city staff received unanimous resolution of council to move those things out towards likely. The reason why we didn't step on it right away is because we were waiting for new things to come in place so that we could remove those and then we could put something new in its place so it didn't look like we just had ripped something out for no reason. So, but think about that. So city staff were directed to proceed more than a year ago. Since that time, we talked about it in public. It's well known, the move. In January of this year, we made a grant application which mentioned the fact of the moving to likely, and that was a unanimous decision. And that grant is, I can't comment on whether we received or not received that grant because I just can't comment on that at this point in time. It's not releasable information. Since then, we've also, in this year of this council term, we've had 4 strat planning sessions. Those 4 strat planning sessions, the idea never came up that, hey, you know what, let's rethink this. We need a different strategy around that. The day the contractor arrives to remove the equipment, we're faced with, oh, let's have a special council meeting to discuss it further. Puts us from a staff perspective in quite an awkward position of, it almost ties your hands with projects. So I don't, if council does change the direction on it, it's council's prerogative, and I'm not trying to say it's not in any way, but put staff in a very difficult position with regards to projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. And I just want to clarify that, yeah, I brought this forward, but in view of the fact that once the word got out there that we were moving the steam shovel, that this new information started coming forward. So that's why we are at here today. Now, we've had my statement. We've had you can see the recommendation is that council, and this is a staff recommendation, that council reaffirms the commitment made by the previous council on May 22 or 2022. Pardon me, is that? But May 2022, that the steam shovel and the steam boiler will be removed from LHTAKO DENE Park and relocated back to Likely. Before we go ahead with that recommendation, I'd like council to think about the fact that that the steam boiler, the pump and the steam boiler are not artifacts of Likely. In fact, they are artifacts of Quesnel. And I'd like us to think about keeping them here because they never were in Likely in the first place. So I'll open the floor up to questions if anybody wants to make a motion to make that recommendation. The floor is yours.
So I'll make the recommendation. I'll move it, and I'll look for a seconder so we can have discussion on it, please.
Okay, so it's moved by Councillor Rudenberg, seconded by Councillor Elliott, and that includes the steam pump and the boiler.
Yes.
Okay, is there any further discussion on that? Councillor McKelvey.
Okay, I have maybe I have a conflict of interest, but my family has been very involved in the reconstruction of that steam shovel, and it took years. They went and got it. They brought it here. They spent hours and hours, actually years, putting that steam shovel back together. And it is an incredible piece of machinery, and it is a draw for tourists to look at. The fact that that thing is going to go back to Likely, out to the bullion pit, where it could possibly be vandalized because it's in an area where it's not supervised. And to me, that's just a real shame that we're going to do that. So I would implore that you think very carefully, because that was a gift to the city, and I think it's really important that we keep it in our own area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKelvey. Anybody else want to speak? Councillor Runge.
I just have a question, a point of clarification, or maybe a question to the city manager. When was our last conversation with the Chamber of Commerce with regards to the steam shovel? Because the reason I'm asking this question is because there hasn't been an update on their Chamber of Commerce site. When I went, they're not even viewed as active. If you go to Google, it shows as an inactive site. When you go to it, I think their last post was 2020. So I just because I feel bad about reneging on something, but the question is, how strong is that committee there that we're dealing with here, or are they just two people to whom we offered the shovel?
So it wasn't not just the Chamber of Commerce. It was the Chamber of Commerce. It was the management for the Likely Hatfield Community Forest. It was some political representatives from that area who were kind of a committee responsible for taking it. The last conversation that we had with them was about possibly a month ago. I'm just a little fuzzy. I think it was around 3 weeks to a month ago, making sure that they were getting ready for this piece of equipment to arrive, because you can't just take it somewhere and drop it on the ground. You have to be ready for it, right? It has to go, and they were ready for it. They were getting ready for it. Their construction window doesn't start quite as early as ours does, but they were getting ready for it, and they were excited, and that's all I can say. So in good faith, I think that they're expecting it. They're doing what they need to do. They're doing some fundraising to help fund their efforts, and where the the funding stops is that we grant funding to the point where we drop it off on their side, and then they pay for the cost to install it on their end.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. And before I call the question on the motion, I really have to question the intent, the apparent deliberate attempt to send the steam, what do you call that? The steam boiler and the pump to Likely when it's never been to Likely before. I ask you to at least pull that back from the package. Go ahead, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have to be, I hadn't heard that information that you said about the steam pump being a Quesnel piece, not, obviously the steam shovel is from Likely. To me, that the historical connection there is pretty clear. The steam pump, if it's from Quesnel, maybe that's an issue where we sit and we do a bit more research on that one to see. And frankly, because it's a smaller piece, it makes it easier to find a spot for it too, right? Whereas possibly we could do more work on that if that was council's direction, just to investigate that further on the actual steam pump.
Okay, could I ask the mover and seconder if they would kindly remove the steam boiler from that recommendation so that we can study it in more detail, please?
I'm sorry, I haven't had an opportunity to speak on the original motion. I'm not prepared to change my motion right at this time.
Okay, and well, obviously, if the mover's not prepared to do it, the seconder really doesn't have a say in that.
And I agree with her anyway.
Okay, so we're sending a valuable Quesnel artifact to Likely. That's fine.
No, sir, we're having conversation about the topic. You haven't even asked anybody if they have more questions or want to discuss this.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I haven't called the question yet.
You just stated that we're sending it back to Likely.
That's what the motion says. The motion is the recommendation. Yeah. And the recommendation says, it says right here, to send the steam shovel and the steam boiler, which are two pieces, back to Likely. Well, my point is that steam boiler and accompanying pump were never in Likely to start with.
With respect, Mr. Mayor, I understand your point, but we should have an opportunity to discuss the recommendation.
Okay, discuss away. Who's discussing?
Sure.
Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. Several different things in regards to your opening statement. First off, though, we keep talking about process with this council, and the mayor does not have the end power to make something stop without coming to council. So when I heard that you had asked for the work to stop on the project, council knew nothing about that. So we talk about process all the time, and so that's one of those points that we have to keep working on how process works with this council. So the other piece that really stands out, no matter whether you agree or disagree with what's going on, is that it has been unanimous votes right through this whole process, including yourself, Mayor Paull, including everybody at this table. There have been several unanimous votes on moving the steam shovel. So when I hear all of a sudden this pushback from the community and coming from you, it really surprises me when you've had several unanimous votes, which means you all voted in favor for it. One of my other concerns comes from the community of Likely, where I have received phone calls in regards to a community member, in their mind's eye, being harassed and bullied in regards to the community moving the steam shovel, et cetera, to Likely. I find that totally disrespectful of this person to think that to email likely, to ask them to put up something at their general store without actually asking the owner of the store to have anything put up. I get the passion of people, but, perceived harassing and bullying is not appropriate, no matter who this person is. I just find that, likely is acting on good faith with us in regards to the movement of these pieces of equipment. And to have to put up with the harassing and bullying, I think after the fact, we're going to need to send a letter of apology to certain people in that community because I believe they should not have had to put up with that. You talk about that there has been no transparency of this event. I respectfully disagree. This has been quite transparent. This has not been done in camera. This has been done in open public meetings. It has been done in the public. So lack of transparency, I really do have to disagree with you, Mayor. I would look forward to hearing what other people have to say in regards to the two pieces of equipment. That's why I'm not willing to change my motion right now, because I've not heard from everybody in regards to both pieces of equipment. Yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rudenberg. Councillor Runge.
Thank you. And you know what? My issue is that unanimous vote that we had in May last year. We have new information here that we didn't have before. We have historical information that wasn't there before. And we actually have this letter dated May 30th, which is talking about removing obstructions. As a council, I believe we started to ask these questions last year, and we were actually, I believe, if I remember correctly, cut down on those things, because I think I seem to recall asking, I'm not sure if it was at a council meeting or in private, about why not keeping these things in Quesnel, possibly in a different location. I absolutely agree that we should be making room in the LHTAKO DENE Park. I think that has a fabulous new life that's being breathed into it. But that being said, and I think most of you guys know, I've always disagreed with moving these shovels. Many times it was because of the cost of moving them far away. So if there is a way for us to revisit this, I would be in favor of revisiting it. There's a lot of historical stuff that we have here that wasn't given to us last year when we made our unanimous decision. And for me, and I think I said this at the last meeting, I would love to see multiple precincts in this town, and maybe they move them up to the Antique Machinery Park, maybe it's by the railway station. I like the idea of having different tourist hotspots. Anyway, so that's, I guess, my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Runge. I'm going to go to Councillor Vic and then Councillor Elliott. Sorry, I got it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So out of the city manager's report, I guess the only thing I guess I would disagree with, certainly in our public discussions, the designation of this piece of equipment in terms of where it came from, how it got here in the first place, that wasn't clearly laid out or definitively laid out, but certainly informally, there was, it was intimated that how that shovel ended up here may not have been above board, and that was intimated. So the question in my mind is, does the decision that was made back in May 2022, is that decision, can it stand based on some predispositions I may have had in that vote? Also, as Councillor Runge has indicated, there is some information here that you have to wonder if we would have understood the context of how that equipment ended up here and the effort that went into it and the fact that it was bought for $1 from the province. I think it's difficult to know with all that in its proper context how that conversation may have ended up back in 2022. So that's the struggle I'm having, layered in there with a commitment we've made to another community to transfer that piece of equipment to them. So that's the struggle I'm having here. And I'll leave it at that at this moment.
Thank you, Councillor Vic, and I can certainly appreciate your struggle, because that is the root of my struggle. And I would suggest, before I go to Councillor Goulet, that if we were voting on that motion of May 20th, 2022 tonight, given all of this information that is in front of us, I dare say that that motion would not have been unanimous. Councillor Goulet.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, with this new information, struggle, but I also look at the timeline, and I'm looking at May 10th, 2022, 1 year. We're in May, March, we're in May, right? It's been a year, and during that year, this information hasn't come to us at any point at a council meeting, which makes you just kind of wonder. But with this being a unanimous decision, I think that when it was explained, I think it was part of that. It was a piece of likely history, is how I read that back when that decision was made, that actually did belong to likely, and it came across as that was a piece that was actually out in likely, stemmed from likely, and came from likely, is how I read that. So I'm just a little bit taken back to Councillor Lorianne Rudenberg's part. I know process, and we should be talking about process as a council, right? We get this yesterday, and you know, it just kind of, it flabbergasted me how maybe there was a better process for us to do this, but to stop work that's been already out there and the plans have been made is also disrespectful to the management, I guess, or the people that are looking after and trying to get that equipment moved. And we're in a process now, and they're ready to move it, and things are now being put on hold. It just flabbergasted me. But for me, I'm going to stick with the recommendation, and I'll probably be voting for the recommendation. I'm going to put it out there and say that I'm supporting it. I think it was a unanimous decision. We had a whole year, and we should have been having some type of discussion, but here we are trying to change the decision last minute and last time. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm personally disappointed that we're going back and discussing a situation that was voted on unanimously. I'm very disappointed that it was you that went down there and had the conversation to stop the project when this was a council decision and it was unanimous. I think that doesn't put council in a good light at all if one member of council can move forward and stop any project that we've voted on more than a year ago, and staff has to stop everything. I don't know if there's a cost going out to this contractor that's now been put on hold. We promised the equipment to Likely, and there's probably preparations taking place there now, and if not, at least we've given our word, and to renege on that right now, I wouldn't be feeling very good about. I am also aware of conversations that were had with individuals in Likely, and I'll ask the city manager if we know who that individual was. Are we aware of anyone that was making phone calls out there?
Thank you. I don't feel comfortable asking that question or answering that question because I can't verify it. I was not part of that conversation.
That's fine, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I think, I've been told who is making the calls, and I think it's just disturbing that's actually taking place, that people are getting bullied. I don't think that's how we should be handling ourselves at all. The timing of this situation, to have a special meeting called yesterday, and then immediately we start getting emails from people, to me, like, how did that information even get out there that quick? It's bizarre. 24 hours, and we're already getting emails from people saying, yeah, it shouldn't be moving. So it has to move from the area that it's at, unless we're going to renege on the LHTAKO DENE Park as well. It has to move from that area because that's where the signage is going to be, and the park needs to be completed. I have, Mr. Mayor, heard conversations about the moving of the steam shovel, but I guess the people that I'm talking to are not the same people as you, because the people that I've talked to are in favor of it. I hear people talking to me about, our heritage being destroyed and things like that, and it should never take place. But, that's just so small-sighted. I mean, we've been here for a couple of hundred years, and First Nations have been here for millennia, and that was one of their biggest gathering places with thousands of individuals there. So I think that's kind of a moot point for me. So I will too be in favor of, I'll be voting in favor of the recommendation. I don't think this has been handled correctly. We've had 4 strat planning sessions. It's not been mentioned once. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. I will say that I was away all last week, and it wasn't until I got home yesterday that I had a pile of emails in my inbox and a pile of phone calls that I had to respond to. So because I was I had my city iPad with me, but I didn't have my personal computer with me, and so I wasn't picking up on those messages, and they piled up. And I mean, I submitted the request from, I submitted the request to the city manager yesterday. Today that was Monday, Tuesday. So I mean, it's only been less than, roughly 24 hours since I just said, can we pause this thing until we have a meeting? So here we are. Councillor Runge.
With due respect to the mayor, because I think he does have a prerogative to move some of his items forward. And I don't feel we've actually got all the information all the time. And if things were reversed here, we would be pushed through this fairly quickly. So I think this discussion is actually quite healthy. I don't think we have to slam one person or another. I think the steam shovel, I agree with you, should be moved from that location. I've said this, I think, many, many times. It could stay in Quesnel. So the idea of pausing it and revisiting it might be a solid decision here. It will. I don't want to say it shouldn't move from where it is now. Even if we have to put it up to the machinery park temporarily, I've got other locations. It doesn't matter. But I don't know. I don't think likely it's ready to have it put in right now. Number one, I've always talked about from a financial perspective that we're holding the bag here and we're doing these things. I don't know 100% because there's some things that are still not publicly disclosed with regards to finances going out. I'm perfectly willing to revisit this, and I know it makes us look horrible relative to likely, but we also didn't get a lot of information last year. So I think it's really important that we actually have a wholesome discussion on this. And yes, as a council, I think we do have the right to say, look, This isn't I hope this isn't a normal thing for all our future, ways of looking at things. But we should have the right to say, hey, there's a lot of pushback here. There's a lot of things that we didn't necessarily get all the information on when we made our original decisions. Maybe it is okay to just pause for a little while and see what happens.
Thank you, Councillor Runge. Before I go to Councillor Rudenberg, just for Councillor Elliott's information, I am not adamant. I am not in favor of leaving the steam shovel in LHTAKO DENE Park, as you have implied. In fact, I was putting forward a suggestion that it would be very easy for us to simply pull that steam shovel across the road without having to take anything off of it. You wouldn't even need to lower the boom because there's no power lines there, and put it over in the area. We've got a RV parking area there with the Sani dump, and it would be quite an attraction. In fact, I even suggested that likely could put up some interpretive signage there in conjunction with the steam shovel to promote their area and the bullion pit. And I submit that for likely that would be a bigger tourist draw to have that steam shovel in Quesnel where thousands of tourists and travelers would see it, rather than having it tucked away in a hole out at the bullion pit. So I just wanted to make it clear that I am not in favor. I do want that steam shovel moved out of LHTAKO DENE, but and I want to make that clear.
I wasn't implying, Mr. Mayor, I was not implying that you wanted it kept there. It's just that I've heard that in the community. Okay, but I will ask you, do you know the person that's been phoning likely and harassing people?
No, I actually phoned, I tried to phone I don't know if it's the manager of the Likely Community Association, but I never got a call back. I have never, ever spoken to her, except, well, probably about 4 years ago when I was selling advertising to Likely for the Quesnel, for the Barkerville Visitors Guide. No. And then Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you. So I think we need to stop making assumptions about whether Likely is ready for this or not. Unless we know for sure, we should not be making assumptions. Because I can say my understanding is they're ready, but that's making an assumption. So I think we need as a collective to stop making those assumptions. And about this new info, so again, I go back a year. So if this was a concern a year ago, the opportunity to find this new information would have been available a year ago for the concerned councillor at the time, who's now mayor. So for us to say that we didn't have this information, it's because nobody brought it forward. This information hasn't changed from a year ago, right? So this is information that you found online, et cetera. It would have been available to us a year ago if this was a concern. So to say...
With all due respect, I did not go looking for information. The information came to me.
So, but a year ago, during all of those votes, the opportunities for this information to come forward was still there. So I have a hard time with not saying that we didn't have the information available that is considered new, which I appreciate. The other piece is, if it makes it easier to move that recommendation, to split it into two, so we talk about the steam shovel and the steam boiler separately. If that makes it easier for people, I could do that, but I'm not prepared to delete both of them.
Okay, Councillor, where's I going? I got Councillor McKelvey. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just think that information could have been available a year ago, and to me, that's kind of not important. It's available now. And I think that we should revisit this, because I think we're going to have a huge pushback from the community if we take that steam shovel and send it down to Likely. And as I said before, it's going to be out in the bullion pit, and it's going to get trashed out there. It's going to get vandalized. And that just breaks my heart, because I know how much time and effort went into restoring that piece of machinery. That's pretty incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to city manager I'm going to, I did receive a call from someone out in Likely, and a leader in Likely, who expressed that very same concern, that they were afraid that there was two issues that were of main concern to that person. One was the liability of people climbing on it, but we basically have the same liability here in Quesnel with people climbing on it down at LHTAKO DENE Park. And the other one was that because there's nobody out there living there and walking by there, the bullion pit is a very lonely place, that it could get vandalized and stripped of certain pieces of hardware. So, city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just trying to understand some of the comments by council around new information. So from what I can gather, the new information referred to by some councillors was the fact that it wasn't stolen. We bought it for $1. Never in any of the reports that was brought to council did we ever say that there was some nefarious chain of events that led to this thing coming into town. So if that's the basis for the new information, that it came to us for $1 from the province and that we supposedly paid $1, I don't see that that's a basis for changing a decision and changing what we're doing with that machine. All it is, well, we must have got here somewhere. We knew that. We didn't know it came for $1. but we certainly never presented it as stolen. So for council to say that, oh yeah, it was nefarious, or council or staff was suggesting, is totally incorrect, because that was never suggested. So I would, my opinion is that new information doesn't constitute a decision-changing event. That, to me, that's a pretty small piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager, and I just might remind you that you're sort of crossing the political line there and really engaging in a debate that really should be council's prerogative. I'll just leave it at that. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do feel that it's the city manager's job to bring facts forward. If someone has been misspeaking about it being stolen, I want to hear the facts. Just like you want to hear the facts on these things that were put out 35 years ago.
Thank you. What I was saying that regarding the comment that it was stolen, I heard it from someone in Likely, and that's a fact.
That you heard it from someone. Yeah, I get
I heard it. Yeah,
I get that.
Person
And
phoned me.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so who else? Anybody
I'm
else?
still on, Mr. Mayor. If you don't,
carry on.
It's okay. Yeah, and to Councillor McKelvey's point of view, I get the juxtaposition of you feeling that it could be a conflict of interest. I get that your family worked on it, but this was something that we voted on unanimously, and I don't think we should be basing our feelings on, whether my dad or my uncle or my family worked on a piece. We agreed to it, we voted on it unanimously, and now we're looking at things that we could have researched a year ago, but it's 35 years old. The bullion pit, we could have that conversation about things being vandalized and never move forward on anything. I think to have an attraction out there for Likely is important for that community, and beyond that, we've promised them that. I'm happy to hear that you say that if it was moved to the Sani loop there, that it would receive thousands of people looking at it and direct them to Likely, because that flies in the face of your argument with the gold pan, right? You say that no one's going to go down to the gold pan here, but obviously if they could walk to the steam shovel, they go to the gold pan, and thousands of people come to Quesnel and wouldn't get lost out there. So I just think that this is something we've talked about ad nauseum. We promised it to Likely. I think we should move forward on it.
Okay, it sounds to me like the discussion is pretty well over. Councillor Rudenberg, as the mover, do you want to take out the steam boiler out of that motion, and we'll deal with that at another time? I don't know how you want to handle that.
Sorry.
Sir, we'll have questions and comments after the meeting. That's in our procedure bylaw. Okay, so what do you want to do with your motion? Okay, so we're sending the boiler and the pump to Likely if this motion passes. Am I correct?
That's
Okay. All right. I will call the question on the motion. All in favor? 1, 2, 3. Opposed? Fourth carries the vote. So there we have it. So is there any further business for the pleasure of council? Councilor, City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So with that voting result, then I need to clarify the fact that we are still then going to proceed with moving the steam shovel and that other artifact out of LHTAKO DENE Park and we will end up putting it in a temporary location until such decision of council where that permanent location will be, but that move out of LHTAKO DENE Park will be happening very quickly as soon as we get that contractor re-engaged.
Okay, is it proper to maybe have a discussion about, we don't want to move it twice. Would the logical temporary place be over in the Sandy Station loop? That's pretty easy to do.
Thank you. I think that's a broader conversation that needs to be held. There's a lot of issues around moving that big of a piece of apparatus anywhere. At the end of the day, in something that's a very busy site at the Sandy Loop in the summertime with the trailers in and out, and lots of those folks with the big RVs are quite vision challenged when they're driving those. You don't want to create a site where it's too busy and too many different things going on at once. So we would need to take a different look at it from staff and bring some recommendations forward. I'm suggesting we find a temporary holding yard, whether that be at the Antique Machinery Park or potentially a temporary holding yard just in a commercial yard somewhere.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you two, but with respect, I mean, moving it temporarily over to the Sandy Dump area, you don't even need to put the boom down. But if we're going to go and move it out to the Antique Machinery Park, we've basically got to take the boom off of it, which is money. So I just leave it with that. I'm going to go to Councillor Vic.
Yeah, I would make a motion to, with due respect, Mr. Mayor, to accept the city manager's recommendation to move it to a temporary holding location until we've had a good discussion on where it may end up permanently. And I think it could be transported there safely and be left for a thoughtful.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll be happy to disclose that when we figure what that will be. It's not, there's no, you can't hide something that large.
Yes, and your mayor has a very good recommendation for you. But, okay, so I'm going to call any further discussion on the resolution, Councillor Rudenberg?
I have another question.
But so we're going to take the vote on that motion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now, Councillor Rudenberg.
Thank you. So I know that we did have a grant application in, and that was specifically to move it. And if we're successful with that grant, what happens now? How does that, we have to send it back, correct? And it will not help us to move it anywhere else. It was a specific grant?
Thank you. We'll have to, that language was within the grant. We will have to get back to the grantors and see if there's any leeway within the scope of that grant. It could end up potentially costing us a portion of that grant, yes.
Yeah, exactly, because it doesn't matter where we move it. It's going to cost us money, whether we implicate it as time from staff or the contractor. It's still going to cost us money to move it wherever, so.
Thank you. And if I may add to that, will actually cost us more money than originally thought, because we will end up moving it somewhere, disengaging it from the truck, storing it. If we decide a final location for it, we'll reload it on the truck, move it over to the new. So it will cost us more money.
And this also includes the boiler, correct?
Thank you. And yes, correct, that boiler has already been moved from its current location.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Elliott.
So I'm curious, Mr. Mayor, are you going to communicate with Likely?
Why should I do that? That's not my job.
So
Councillor Rudenberg.
I respectfully disagree. Seeing as council has now decided not to move it, the mayor needs to politely let the community of Likely know council's change in plans. And so, yes, it is. I mean, we can have staff help you design the letter, but it needs to come from you. I'm sorry, with all due respect, Mayor.
I fully appreciate that, but I have been in deep caca and being accused of contacting people in Likely, and I'm reluctant to do that now, but I will do that one thing. Okay, so do we have a motion on the floor?
I apologize, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, 1 second. Did
Yes, go ahead,
did
Councillor
anyone
Elliott.
accuse you of contacting Likely?
Pardon me?
Who accused you of contacting Likely?
Nobody at this table.
Okay, so I agree with Councilor Rudenberg. I feel that it is your job. You brought it forward to delay it.
I'd be happy to do that, but the city manager and I or staff will talk that over. That's not a big deal. Okay, anything else? Did we vote on that last motion? Oh, sir, did you have a question? You still have a question? Okay, before we do that, did we vote on the motion for temporary relocation, and that's all done? Okay, sir, if you could come forward, give us your name. I know who you are, but maybe these people don't. You got to give us your name and your residential address and your question has to pertain to tonight's discussion, obviously.
George Doherty, resident Quesnel, Pioneer family, 1713 Hemlock Avenue. 1713 Hemlock Avenue, CRD resident, but I'm a Pioneer family. Thank you guys for your vote tonight. There's been a lot of work put in to the steam shovel in our beautiful, beautiful town. We're very proud of. Never did I understand actually that it was ever bought for $1. It was never ever sold or sent anywhere. It was actually donated by the King family.
So point of order, I think we're waiting for a question, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to go there.
What I'd like actually, I do like the idea of keeping it in town. I appreciate the idea of keeping it in town very much. If there could be a grant that could be reversed in some way for the benefit of Likely, and it could actually be a tourist attraction for Likely via Quesnel, I think that's something that could benefit Likely. I have emailed Likely. I never got any responses back to see what their actual long-term plan was. But if it could remain in town and actually be a viable tourist attraction via Quesnel through Likely, I think Council's decision tonight, I do appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. And anyone else from the gallery? George?
George Henderson with the radio station 852 Reynard Street. I have a few questions. Are there any concerns if Likely did make preparations for this, that taxpayers are going to have to give them the money for that?
That is a very good question, and we'll cover that ground when we are in touch with Likely.
So moving it, there was a grant to move it, and my understanding from the city manager is that now we're going to move it a couple of times probably. Any idea what that cost might be, and what do you think taxpayers might think of that?
Well, that's why I had the idea of the cheapest move, which is simply across the street, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Okay, last one. What message do you think this sends to other communities?
I think it sends a strong message that, given the fact that there's new information coming forward, significant information that has obviously caused the council to basically change a vote, that sends a message to other communities that we're going to look at new information and act accordingly, that we're not going to simply ignore it.
Thanks.
Anyone else from the gallery? If I don't see anyone else, then I will call for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Rudenberg? Sure. Okay, Rudenberg, and seconded by Councillor McKelvey. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, everyone. That was a tough one.